I'm Janella Massa in Mississauga. This is where the Afghan refugee relief offices once stood, but now the sign that lit up with their name is gone and the office locked. The head of that organization, Sakia Mojadidi, facing 3 counts of fraud. Now, we first brought you this story yesterday from a man who lived in India who says he paid Sakia Mojadidi $15,000 to bring him and his wife to Canada, but after 5 years of waiting, he discovered that his application didn't even exist. Now, today, we're learning about more victims and about just how long this allegedly has been going on.
Since 2014, people were calling me and writing me that they have problem with Ms. Zakia Mujadidi, and they told me that they send money to her. I have a few things, I will show you later, and to sponsor the relative. But years and years gone, and she never processed their application, but she took the money. One family paid $18,000, and another 4 family paid same amount, like maybe should be around $70,000, $80,000. The only problem is that they don't want to come up and say their story. She just mentioned one person name that she could,
Nasir Khalid is a freelance journalist based in Toronto and runs an Afghan community page. He says he's been contacted by families here in Canada and abroad, but some fear going public will jeopardize their own refugee status, or they may have borrowed the money and don't want to publicly admit that they've lost it. Now, he says some members of the Afghan community here tried to arrange a meeting with Mojadidi last year, but nothing came of it. Police are now urging anyone who may have been a victim of Mojadidi to come forward.
Status, fears, does not matter. We want to know about victims. We want you to come forward because that's the only way that we'll be able to prosecute her properly. And if there are other people involved, we want to be able to determine that as well. What's most important is the paper trail. And so we're asking anyone who's coming forward, please provide us with as much information, details, paperwork that we can to start our investigation and continue. Since your story last night, there have been a few other people who have contacted the police, and we anticipated that. Obviously, we used the release to try to get other victims because we know there were other victims out there, and we encourage, if you have dealt with this lady or if you have been the victim of this fraud scheme, please contact us.
And police say at least a dozen more complainants have come forward and they're now investigating, and that the first complaint against Mojadidi was filed back in 2012, but it took some time to figure out which jurisdiction would take over this case because some of the money was wired transatlantically. Now, the big question remains, what happens to those who have been waiting years for an application that was never submitted to Immigration Canada? Well, we asked that question to the ministry, and they say these folks won't get any special consideration if they decide to apply again to become Canadian refugees, because the onus is on them to ensure that the consultants they use are authorized to give immigration advice.